The gold-mirrored walls of the Meridian Grand reflected my image back at me a dozen times, each reflection showing a different shade of terror. My fingers gripped the small gift boxes so tightly the edges cut into my skin, but I welcomed that sharp focus over the suffocating panic rising in my throat. I'd been delivering my art pieces here for 6 months, always through the service elevator, always unseen. Today, the freight elevator was broken, forcing me through the main lobby where shadows from my past could find me. The white powder from my shattered sculpture scattered across the crimson carpet with each hurried step, marking my path like breadcrumbs in a fairy tale gone wrong. I counted steps to the elevator, 23, 24, 25, when his voice cut through the elegant murmur of the lobby like a blade. Ruby. Marcus's voice froze my blood. I didn't turn around, couldn't turn around, but I felt his presence closing in like a storm front. The elevator doors gleamed ahead of me, salvation in polished gold, if I could just reach them before. Don't you dare run for me again. His hand clamped around my wrist with bruising force, spinning me to face him. The gift boxes tumbled from my grip, and I watched in horror as months of work scattered across the marble floor. But it was the look in Marcus's eyes that truly terrified me. That familiar blend of possession and rage that had driven me to flee 6 months ago. We need to talk, he hissed, his grip tightening. You can't keep hiding from what we had. I know people in this industry, Ruby. One word from me, and your little art career is finished. The threat hit like ice water. He meant it. Marcus had connections, influence, the kind of power that could blacklist me from every gallery in the city. But the alternative, going back to him, to that suffocating cage he called love, was worse than professional death. The elevator chimed behind me, doors sliding open like an answered prayer. Without thinking, I wrenched free and stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. I crashed into something solid and warm, a wall of expensive fabric and controlled power that caught me before I could fall. Strong hands steadied me, and I found myself looking up into the coldest gray eyes I'd ever seen. The man was tall, imposing, dressed in a black tailored suit that probably cost more than my rent. A subtle tattoo curved along his neck, disappearing beneath his collar, and everything about him screamed danger in a way that made Marcus look like a petulant child. Going up, his voice was silk over steel, accented with something Eastern European that sent shivers down my spine. Behind me, Marcus was shouting, demanding I come back, but the stranger's presence seemed to create a barrier between us and the chaos of the lobby. Those gray eyes never left mine as he reached past me and pressed a button. The elevator doors began to close. Wait! Marcus lunged forward, but it was too late. The last thing I saw was his furious face disappearing behind polished gold, leaving me trapped with a man who looked far more dangerous than anything I was running from. The elevator climbed smoothly for exactly 30 seconds before it lurched to a violent stop. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in an amber glow that made the stranger's eyes look like molten silver. A mechanical grinding echoed from somewhere above us, followed by an ominous silence. Well, he said, his accent wrapping around the word like velvet, this is unfortunate timing. I pressed myself against the mirrored wall, suddenly aware of how small the space was, how his presence seemed to fill every corner. What's happening? Mechanical failure, I guess. He pulled out his phone, frowned at the screen. No signal. The mirrors interfere with reception. His gaze found mine in the reflection. I'm Tikhon, by the way. Tikhon Bazhenov. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it suggested it should. Ruby Weaver. I know. Those 2 words sent ice through my veins. What do you mean, you know? He leaned against the opposite wall, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Your ex-boyfriend has been making quite a scene in my hotel for weeks, harassing staff, demanding information about your delivery schedule. I've been keeping an eye on the situation. Your hotel? The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. You own the Meridian Grand. Among other things. His smile was sharp as a blade. Marcus Kellerman owes some very dangerous people a considerable amount of money. People who don't appreciate when their debtors create public disturbances in establishments I protect. The elevator shuddered violently, throwing me forward. Tikhon's arms caught me instantly, pulling me against his chest as the lights flickered. For a moment, I was surrounded by the scent of expensive cologne and something darker, gunpowder, maybe, or leather. His heart beat steady and strong beneath my palm. "Easy," he murmured, his voice closer to my ear than it should be. "I won't let you fall." The way he said it made me think he wasn't just talking about the elevator. I should have been terrified, trapped with a stranger who clearly moved in circles where people owed dangerous debts. Instead, I felt safer than I had in months. "Why are you helping me?" I whispered. His hands were still on my arms, steadying me even though the elevator had stopped shaking. "Because men like Marcus think they can take whatever they want. I have a particular dislike for bullies." "And what kind of man are you?" The question hung between us in the amber light. His thumb traced along my wrist where Marcus had grabbed me, and I saw something dark flicker across his features. "The kind who makes problems disappear permanently," he said quietly. "But I'm honest about what I am." "That's more than your ex can say." The elevator groaned ominously above us, but I barely heard it. All I could focus on was the way Tikhon was looking at me, like I was something precious he'd found in the wreckage. The black sedan that picked me up was worth more than my annual income, and the driver who held the door open had the kind of alertness that suggested he was more bodyguard than chauffeur. When we pulled up to a gleaming high-rise instead of a restaurant, my stomach dropped. "Change of plans?" I asked. "Mr. Bazhenov prefers privacy for business discussions," the driver said, escorting me to a private elevator that required a key card. The penthouse doors opened to reveal Tikhon in dark slacks and a white shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that looked like they could snap a man's neck. The space behind him was all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art, the kind of wealth that whispered rather than shouted. "You came," he said, and I caught something like relief in his voice. "You didn't exactly give me an address to decline to." His smile was sharp. "Would you have come if I had?" "Probably not." The realization that he'd manipulated me into this should have sent me running, but exhaustion had settled into my bones like lead. I was tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of jumping at shadows, tired of being afraid. Dinner was perfectly prepared by someone who clearly wasn't Tikhon, served on china that probably cost more than my rent. He laid out the terms like a business contract: 6 months, public appearances, complete discretion. I would live here, in his space, playing the role of devoted girlfriend to legitimize his image. "And what exactly is it about your image that needs legitimizing?" I asked. "Let's just say some of my business associates prefer their partners to appear domesticated." The words sent a chill through me, but before I could respond, he was standing. "Come. Let me show you something." He led me down a hallway to a room that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced north, providing perfect natural light. Easels stood ready, a palette of expensive paints waited on a marble counter, and canvases were stacked against one wall like promises. "This would be yours," he said quietly. "Your space. I wouldn't enter without permission." I walked to the windows, looking out at the city lights that sparkled like scattered diamonds. In the reflection, I could see Tikhon watching me, his expression unreadable. "Why me?" I whispered. "Because you're running from the same thing I am. Control. The difference is, I'm offering you a choice." That night, back in my apartment with Maya's warnings echoing in my head, I stared at my phone for an hour. The smart choice was to block his number, change my delivery route, maybe even leave the city. The safe choice. But I was so tired of being safe and small and scared. I typed 3 letters and hit send before I could change my mind. Yes. My phone buzzed immediately. "Carl will be there at 10 tomorrow morning. Pack light. Everything else will be provided." I'd just made a deal with the devil, and God help me, I was relieved the elevator lurched back to life 40 minutes later, delivering us to the lobby where a team of maintenance workers waited with apologetic expressions. Tikhon stepped out first, his hand briefly touching the small of my back, a gesture so natural it felt like we'd done this dance before. "Ms. Weaver," he said, his voice carrying that same silk over steel quality that made my pulse skip. "Walk with me." We moved through the lobby, past the scattered remains of my sculptures that housekeeping was carefully collecting. Marcus was nowhere to be seen, and I wondered if that was coincidence or design. "I have a proposition for you," Tikhon said as we reached the hotel's entrance. The afternoon sun caught the subtle tattoo on his neck, making it look like shadows dancing beneath his skin. "You need protection from Marcus." I need a woman on my arm for certain business functions. I stopped walking. What kind of business functions? The kind where appearances matter. Where having a beautiful, intelligent woman beside me sends the right message about my legitimacy. His gray eyes held mine steadily. 6 months. You live under my protection, attend events as my companion, and Marcus becomes a problem of the past. And in return, you get safety, financial compensation, and the connections to launch your art career properly. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering. Think about it. Before I could respond, he was walking away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with his card burning in my palm like a brand. That evening, I sat in my cramped studio apartment researching Tikhon Bazhenov while Maya paced behind me, her anxiety filling the small space. Ruby, this is insane, she said for the 10th time. Look at what you're reading. I was looking. Tikhon Bazhenov, CEO of Bazhenov Holdings, owner of 3 luxury hotels, 2 restaurants, and a private security firm. Clean record, charitable donations, society page regular. But buried deeper in the search results were whispers, connections to Eastern European imports, business rivals who'd mysteriously relocated, a reputation for solving problems with surgical precision. My phone rang. Unknown number. Have you decided? Tikhon's voice was warm honey in my ear. I haven't even. Dinner. Tomorrow night. 7 o'clock. I'll send a car. Maya was shaking her head frantically, mouthing no, no, no. This is crazy, I whispered into the phone. Crazy is staying where you are, waiting for Marcus to escalate. I'm offering you a way out, Ruby. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it. The line went quiet except for the sound of my own heartbeat. Through my window, I could see the lights of the city, all those lives, all those possibilities just out of reach. 7 o'clock, I heard myself say. Maya sank onto my couch with a groan, but I was already wondering what one wore to dinner with the devil. 3 suitcases. That's what 27 years of life amounted to when you stripped away everything that didn't matter. I folded my grandmother's vintage scarves between my clothes, tucked my sketchbooks into every available corner, and tried not to think about what I was leaving behind. Maya sat on my bed, tears streaming down her face as she watched me pack. This is insane, Ruby. You don't know anything about this man except that he's dangerous, and he wants to own you for 6 months. He's not buying me, I said, though the words felt hollow. It's a business arrangement. Business arrangements don't require you to live in his penthouse and playhouse. She grabbed my hands, forcing me to look at her. What if you can't get out? What if 6 months becomes forever? I didn't have an answer for that, because the same fear had been clawing at my chest since I'd sent that text. But the alternative, staying here, waiting for Marcus to escalate, watching my art career crumble under his threats, felt like a different kind of prison. The black sedan arrived at exactly 10 o'clock. Maya hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, whispering promises to check on me, to call the police if I didn't answer my phone, to never forgive me if I got myself killed. Tikhon's penthouse felt different in daylight, larger, more intimidating. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair introduced herself as Elena, the housekeeper, and showed me to a suite that was bigger than my entire apartment. The closet was already stocked with clothes in my exact size, designer pieces with tags still attached. How did he? I started to ask. Mr. Bazhenov is very thorough, Elena said with a knowing smile. Lunch is at 1. He'll be in meetings until then. I spent the morning exploring my new cage, marveling at the marble bathroom, the silk sheets, the view of the city that stretched endlessly beyond the windows. Everything was perfect, beautiful, and utterly foreign. The art studio was exactly as he'd shown me, but now it was filled with supplies I'd only dreamed of owning. Professional-grade paints, brushes that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, canvases stretched and primed to perfection. A note in elegant handwriting lay on the easel. For when inspiration strikes. T. I was still standing there, overwhelmed by the gesture, when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Tikhon appeared in the doorway, but didn't enter, just as he'd promised. Everything to your liking? He asked. It's too much, I whispered. It's an investment. Your talent deserves proper tools. His gray eyes studied my face. This is your space, Ruby. I meant what I said about not entering without permission. Something in his tone made me believe him, and for the first time since arriving, I felt like I could breathe. Anya arrived at 4 o'clock with an arsenal of makeup brushes and a dress bag that looked like it contained something worth more than my car. She was a tiny Russian woman with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper tongue, speaking rapid-fire instructions as she transformed me into someone I barely recognized. "Hold still," she commanded, applying mascara with surgical precision. "Tonight you are not struggling artist. Tonight you are woman who belongs on arm of Tikhon Bazhenov." The dress was midnight blue silk that hugged every curve and fell to just above my knees. Diamonds, real ones, Anya assured me, glittered at my throat and ears. When I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who could walk into any room and command attention. "Perfect," Anya declared. "Now remember, you are in love. Madly, desperately in love. Let them see it in your eyes." The charity gala was held in the ballroom of another luxury hotel, all crystal chandeliers and marble columns. Tikhon appeared at my side in a black tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped off a magazine cover, offering his arm with old-world courtesy. "Ready?" he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I nodded, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. The moment we entered the ballroom, conversations paused. Eyes tracked our movement as Tikhon guided me through the crowd, his hand possessive on the small of my back. Tikhon, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, approached us, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "And this must be the mysterious woman we've been hearing about." "Ruby Weaver," Tikhon said, his voice carrying a note of pride that sounded almost genuine. "Ruby, this is Senator Morrison." I smiled, extending my hand. "Senator, what a pleasure." The evening passed in a blur of introductions, business associates, society figures, people whose names I recognized from newspaper headlines. I played my part perfectly, laughing at the right moments, asking intelligent questions, letting my hand rest on Tikhon's arm with casual intimacy. Then I saw him across the room, a man with pale eyes and a cruel mouth, watching us with undisguised interest. Something about his stare made my skin crawl. "Who was that?" I whispered to Tikhon. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Dmitry Volkov, a business rival." Dmitry approached with predatory grace, his smile sharp as a blade. "Tikhon, still collecting beautiful things, I see." "Dmitry." Tikhon's voice was ice. "I wasn't aware you'd been invited." "Oh, I go where the interesting people are." Dmitry's pale eyes fixed on me. "And you, my dear, are very interesting indeed." I felt Tikhon tense beside me, but I stepped forward with a smile that could have cut glass. "How flattering. Though I'm afraid I'm spoken for." I moved closer to Tikhon, my hand sliding up his chest. "Completely and utterly." Dmitry's smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Enjoy your evening." As he walked away, I felt Tikhon's hand tighten on my waist. When I looked up at him, something had shifted in his gray eyes, something that looked dangerously like genuine affection. "Well done," he murmured, and I realized I'd just passed some kind of test. For months slipped by like scenes from someone else's life. I learned the rhythm of Tikhon's world. Morning coffee in the kitchen while he read financial reports, afternoons painting in my studio while he conducted business calls in 3 different languages, evenings at galas and dinners where I played the devoted girlfriend with increasing ease. The touches that had once felt calculated became natural, his hand finding mine during boring speeches, my fingers straightening his tie before we left for events, the way he'd brush a strand of hair from my face when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Somewhere between the charity auction and the museum fundraiser, the performance had become something else entirely. Maya called on a Tuesday morning, her voice shaking. "Ruby, have you seen the news?" I hadn't. I'd been too absorbed in sketching ideas for my gallery proposal, a project that had grown from a desperate dream into something tangible, thanks to the connections Tikhon had quietly provided. "Marcus is dead," she whispered. "They found him in the river yesterday. The police are calling it suicide." The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the marble counter. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Tikhon in his study, speaking quietly into his phone. He looked up, caught my eye, and something passed between us. An understanding that didn't need words. Marcus was gone. The threat that had driven me into this arrangement had been permanently removed, and I didn't need to ask how. That evening, Tikhon found me in my studio, staring at a half-finished painting of storm clouds over the city. He didn't enter, just leaned against the doorframe with his hands in his pockets. "Are you all right?" he asked. Should I be upset? The question came out sharper than I intended. Should I mourn the man who made my life hell for 2 years? You should feel whatever you feel. There's no right answer. I set down my brush, finally turning to face him. Did you?
No.
His voice was quiet but firm. I didn't have to. Marcus had made enemies of his own. Men who don't appreciate being cheated at cards, especially when the stakes are high. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't. But as I looked at Tikhon standing in my doorway, this man who had given me safety, space to create, a chance to build something meaningful, I realized I didn't care. My gallery proposal is finished, I said instead. His smile was soft, genuine. I'd like to see it. Tomorrow. Over breakfast. It's a date. The word hung between us, and for the first time, it didn't feel like pretense. As he walked away, I caught myself thinking of the penthouse not as Tikhon's space or my temporary refuge, but simply as home. The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like coming alive. I was mixing cerulean blue with titanium white when Elena appeared in my studio doorway, her usually calm face etched with worry. "Mr. Bazhenov needs to see you immediately," she said, in his study. The urgency in her voice sent ice through my veins. I'd never been summoned like this before. Tikhon always respected my creative time, never interrupting unless I invited him in. I found him behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Russian. His free hand was clenched into a fist, and when he looked up at me, his gray eyes were storm clouds.
Да understood.
He ended the call and stood slowly, like a predator preparing to strike. "Sit down, Ruby." "What's wrong?" "Dmitry Volkov has your sister." The words hit me like a physical blow.
Emma.
Sweet, innocent Emma, who was supposed to be safe at college in Boston, 300 miles away from this world I'd dragged myself into. "That's impossible," I whispered. "She's at school." She was taken from her dorm room last night. Tikhon's voice was deadly calm, but I could see the fury burning beneath the surface. Dmitry sent proof of life an hour ago, along with his demands. He slid a photograph across the desk. Emma, bound to a chair, terror stark in her wide brown eyes. A newspaper with today's date was visible beside her. My hands shook as I picked up the image. What does he want?
Territory.
Business concessions. And Tikhon's jaw tightened. You. The room spun around me. Me? He knows you matter to me. He's using Emma as leverage to get to you, and through you to me. Tikhon moved around the desk, his hands gentle as he took the photograph from my trembling fingers. But that's not going to happen. We have to give him what he wants. Emma is innocent. She doesn't deserve.
No.
His voice cut through my panic like a blade. I'm going to handle this, but first I need to know you're safe. There's a compound in the mountains, completely secure. You'll go there tonight. I'm not leaving while Emma. You are. His hands cupped my face, forcing me to meet his eyes. Because if something happens to you, I won't be able to think clearly enough to save her. And Emma needs me thinking clearly. The truth in his words was undeniable. I was a liability now, a weakness Dmitry could exploit. But the thought of hiding while my sister was in danger made me sick. How long? I whispered. A week. Maybe less. His thumb traced along my cheekbone. I will bring her back to you, Ruby. I promise. An hour later, I stood by the elevator with a single bag, watching Tikhon's face memorize mine. Come back to me, little artist, he murmured, pressing a kiss to my forehead. The elevator doors closed between us, and I wondered if I'd ever see him again. The compound was a fortress disguised as a luxury cabin, nestled in mountains so remote I couldn't see another building in any direction. Alexei, Tikhon's head of security, was a mountain of a man with kind eyes and an arsenal that could outfit a small army. He spoke little English, but his presence was oddly comforting as I paced the hardwood floors like a caged animal. I painted to keep from losing my mind. Canvas after canvas filled with violent strokes of red and black, my fear and rage bleeding onto the surface in abstract chaos. Emma's terrified face haunted every brushstroke. The not knowing was torture, worse than any physical pain. On day 3, my phone buzzed with a text from Tikhon. Making progress. Stay strong. Day 5, complications, but manageable. You're safe. Day 7, almost finished. Miss you. Those last 2 words broke something open in my chest. I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then typed and deleted a dozen responses. What could I say? That I missed him too? That somewhere between the charity galas and quiet morning coffees, I'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with a man who could have people killed with a phone call? The realization should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like finally admitting a truth I'd been running from for months. I wasn't just playing a role anymore. I wasn't just grateful for his protection. I was in love with Tikhon Bazhenov, the dangerous, complicated, impossibly gentle man who caught my art supplies when I fell and called me his little artist like it was a prayer. Day 8 brought no message. Day 9, silence that stretched like a held breath. On day 10, I was mixing paint with shaking hands when my phone rang. Tikhon's name on the screen made my heart stop. Emma is safe, he said without preamble, his voice rough with exhaustion. She's at a private medical facility being checked over, but she's unharmed. Dmitri will never threaten anyone I care about again. I sank to my knees on the cabin floor, relief flooding through me so powerfully I couldn't speak. Ruby, are you there? Is it over? I whispered. It's over. I'm sending Alexei to bring you home tomorrow. Home. The word wrapped around my heart like a promise. Not the penthouse, not Tikhon's space. Home. Where he was. Tikhon? Yes. The word stuck in my throat. I love you. I need you. I can't imagine my life without you. I'll see you tomorrow. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the stars, counting the hours until I could see his face again, until I could tell him what I'd finally admitted to myself in this mountain sanctuary. I was going home to the man I loved, and nothing would ever be the same. The penthouse was tomb quiet when I walked through the door, my footsteps echoing on marble that felt foreign after 10 days away. Elena was nowhere to be seen, and the usual hum of activity that surrounded Tikhon's world had been replaced by an unsettling stillness. Tikhon, I called, dropping my bag by the elevator. No answer, but a sliver of light showed beneath his study door, and I could hear the faint sound of ice clinking against glass. I found him slumped in his leather chair, a tumbler of vodka in his hand and exhaustion carved into every line of his face. His white shirt was torn at the shoulder, dark stains that looked suspiciously like blood marking the fabric. You're hurt, I breathed, rushing toward him. He looked up, and the relief that flooded his gray eyes was so raw it stopped me in my tracks. Ruby. My name was a prayer on his lips. You're home. What happened to you? I reached for his shirt, but he caught my wrist gently. It's not my blood. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been screaming. Dmitri resisted negotiation. The past tense told me everything I needed to know. Dmitri Volkov would never threaten anyone again. Emma? Safe. I had her moved to a private facility in Switzerland. She'll recover fully. He set down his glass and stood slowly, wincing. She doesn't remember much. The doctors say that's a mercy. I threw my arms around him then, not caring about the blood or the danger or the violence that clung to him like smoke. He was solid and warm and alive, and for 10 days I'd been terrified I'd never feel his heartbeat against my cheek again. I thought I might lose you, I whispered into his chest. I thought you might not come back. His arms tightened around me, and I felt him press his face into my hair. I had to come back. You were waiting for me. I pulled back to look at him, this man who'd killed for my sister, who'd walked into hell to keep his promise to me. Tikhon, I need to tell you something. These past months, it stopped being pretend for me. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, it was never pretend for me. His hands cupped my face, thumbs tracing my cheekbones. From that first moment in the elevator, you were mine. I just had to wait for you to realize you wanted to be. The confession hung between us like a bridge finally built. When he kissed me, it wasn't the careful, public kisses we'd shared for show. This was desperate and real and tasted like coming home. Stay with me, he whispered against my lips. Not for 6 months. Not for the arrangement. Forever. Forever. I breathed back and meant it with every fiber of my being. We were no longer playing roles. This was real, and it was ours.